Welcome to People Are Everything, the show that's a bit like Desert Island Discs, but rather than bring music, I ask my guests to bring the 5 people that have shaped the person they are. And today we're joined by Jindy Mann. If you've listened since the beginning, you'll know that I've mentioned Jindy probably a few too many times. Because I'm a big fan of his. I love the work he does with Leader Brother Son, where he invites men to come and speak in small groups about whatever's on their minds. I love the work he does on his Substack, It Starts With You. And he's a leadership coach. He lives in Berlin. He's interesting, he's articulate, and he's a lot of fun. So sit back and enjoy Jindy Mann. Hello, Jindy. Welcome to People Are Everything. You were referenced in my very first one with Mark. And so I feel like I've been stalking you ever since and saying, come on, when are you going to come on this podcast and talk to me? So I'm absolutely delighted that you're here with me today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm, as I was just saying to you, I'm really excited about this conversation, genuinely excited. I listened to that conversation with Mark, felt a bit awkward hearing my name so often. And Mark was ribbing me as well about how often my name came up. But we know each other a little bit, and I know where you're coming from with these conversations, and I think they're brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to being part of one.
Actually, I did worry about that when I listened back to that first podcast. I thought, I'm talking about Jindy more than I'm talking about Mark here. Like literally, the first 5 minutes of that podcast, it's all about you. So, because you actually led me to Mark, that's the kind of breadcrumb, if you like. And I know we're very like-minded. Mark as well. I think my little gang of like-minded people is growing, and that's again a sub-purpose of this podcast. I like to collect good people, and so yeah, that's the connection between us. Although in preparation for today, I actually did some prep, Jindy. You'll be amazed. I noticed that we met. We're that rare entity where we actually did meet on a LinkedIn message, because most of those go into the ether, don't they? But there's something about yours when you connected with me first. I think there's something about yours that just captured me, and I remember you and I writing to each other quite a lot before we physically or virtually met. So we're going to get into that in a minute, but I just want to say that it's been a pleasure to sort of talk with you over these years and get to know you and what you're doing. Leader Brother Son, for example, was the first thing I connected with, and I really love your Substack. Start With You. I think that's such a thought-provoking Substack. It's like little vignettes of stories and moods and feelings and thoughts, and just to make you stop for a minute and go, okay, that's interesting. So I am a big fan. India probably coming across a bit gushy now, but listen, that's enough about me. Obviously, the format is that I'm going to ask you who the 5 people are in your life that have had the most impact on you. We're going to go back and forth on that. But I really want to start with you, in your words, kind of sharing with the people listening today who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, so how to summarise that? So I'm Jindy. I live in Berlin. I've lived here for almost 3 years. I moved here because I met my wife, who was already living here. She's from the UK as well. And we have a little boy, a little 18-month-old boy. So we've done quite a lot in 3.5 years. And what do? I guess I think part of what my life's driven by and my work is some of the same things that you're driven by. And that is people and having meaningful conversations with people and helping people to make sense of things, make sense of their world, their lives, their organizations. So I do that broadly in 3 ways. I do leadership coaching, so one-to-one work. I do organizational consulting, so working with groups in organizations or leadership teams. And then the last piece is the piece you mentioned just there, which is Leader Brother Son, which is groups for men, conversation groups, experiences, workshops, settings for men to have meaningful conversations and make sense of things.
And I think that last one was the one that captured me most, because I have a son, he's 21, And, it's difficult, I think, being that age in particular, getting a sense of your own identity as a man in this world. And I'm anybody who knows me very well is that, I grew up my work life was in the 80s and 90s, and there were some behaviours then that largely are being removed from society, shall we say. But there's still remnants, and I still want to sort of campaign for those kind of things. But I am all about inclusivity. I really am. I just want us all to get in a room together and solve our sufferings, because we're all suffering in something. Everyone's in pain with something. And yet this life can also be incredibly joyous and rich. And, you only have to pause for a moment and look outside and be wowed by it. But not to not get into a room and have those meaningful conversations, to me, would just be terrible. So I love the fact that you're inviting men to come and talk, really share in a psychologically safe space the things that are really troubling them. And that struck me, and that's the first time we met was you sharing that concept with me. So that's how we came to be connected. Mm. So yes, so I think we're going to have to get into it now, aren't we? So I know you've had time to think about this, and not everybody finds this particularly easy. I've had a couple of people say to me it's been torturous. So firstly, in choosing your 5, how was it for you?
There were about 4 names that came to mind immediately, and then a few others for that kind of final spot. But what also struck me was there's probably about 100 people who I could say have influenced or shaped my life in some way without them knowing. And they were very small encounters, and sometimes they're complete strangers who I met for 20 minutes. Or have met traveling somewhere, or there were many teachers that came to mind, teachers at school and sixth form. So there's so many of those small encounters, and I actually did want to mention that. I wanted to kind of give a nod to the fact that I've been influenced by people that, sometimes I've met very briefly and I've never known their name and they've never known my name, and that's the impact that person can have. So it was a really, really lovely process to go through, actually, to think about the people who have been significant in some way or are still part of my life, and all of the hundreds of people along the way who have had some impact or influence on me.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, because one of the sub-agendas for this is to get people to think and to sort of stop and go, gosh, I don't know, actually. I was in a situation the other day, and somebody popped into my head who, this happens often, this one person, and you mentioned about a fleeting moment. This person, I spoke to them for less than 10 minutes once at an event 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm always hurting myself, Jindy. I've always got some injury. And I was complaining about something. That's typical of me. And he just looked at me and he went, well, there's no shortcut. It's basically strength conditioning and balancing. And body balancing, that's it. Strength conditioning and body balancing. And I don't know how many times I've thought about that since. That one thought that just comes every time I've got a little kind of ache and pain. I go, right, strength conditioning, body balancing, get down the gym, sort yourself out. And it's just that one fleeting chance encounter that's made such a difference. So I get you completely on that.
Yeah, and if I might just tell a very brief story.
Sure.
We had one of our groups, men's groups, last night, Monday night, and we were talking about spirituality. And I described this experience. I won't tell the whole story because it's quite long, but I had this experience hiking Kilimanjaro about 16 years ago. And there was a woman on the trip who did Reiki, and I was a skeptic about those sorts of things. I was firmly in my management consulting days back then. And on the last day of the trip, I had a back spasm. She healed it with Reiki in a way that makes no rational sense at all. And that experience, I think, cracked something open in me, in the way I saw the world and the way that I realised there was far more to the world than I understood through my kind of rational, logical lens. Yep. And her name's Liz, and I've never kept in touch with her, but I had this incredible, meaningful experience just for 11 days. In that brief moment, which was about 10 minutes. Yeah. That I think shifted me onto a slightly different path.
I know. People, they got a habit. of doing
Yeah.
things like that. And I know, I'm glad you mentioned Kilimanjaro, because I know in your summary you kind of just laid out the sort of core focuses of your work, but in your writing and me just following you around, there's so much to you. I mean, I love the idea of that. I think you wrote once about riding down the west coast of America or something, just getting on your bike and riding,
Yeah.
and I think how you found that so freeing and transformative. And I think it led to a life change, didn't it? You kind of went off in a different direction after that.
Yeah, that was about, when was that? About 10, 12 years ago. And that was the last time I had a full-time permanent job and wasn't self-employed. And I was working for a consulting firm and been on this great journey with them, helped them to grow rapidly in size, but it was starting to feel quite claustrophobic again. And I just asked for a sabbatical, so can I have 3 months off? And they gave me 3 months off, unpaid. And I'd felt this call to adventure. Don't know where it came from, but I just felt this real desire to get into some sort of wildness, some sort of nature, some sort of challenge. So I decided I was going to cycle down the west coast of the States, US, and I didn't even own a bike at the time. So I kind of ordered this bike and it arrived 2 months before I left. And my girlfriend at the time decided to come with me. And so we spent 5 weeks cycling from Seattle to San Francisco, which was about 1,000 miles. And again, that trip came up when I was thinking about this, because we met so many people along the way, and seeing the way they lived and the way they treated us, and so there was so much generosity, that experience fundamentally changed me, for sure. Not to mention the whole kind of being outdoors every day for 5 weeks. And so I came back a different person, and I came back, and my first day back on this consulting assignment I was on, which was in a bank in Canary Wharf, I knew in my body that I just couldn't do it anymore. I physically felt it the moment I walked through the doors. And so I quit within a few days, and I had nothing lined up. And then, while I was working my gardening leave, a friend called me up and said, "Oh, I'm doing this project over here. You fancy coming to help me out as a freelancer?" And then off I went. But that trip, I came back from that trip quite a different person. I didn't realise it at the time, but a very different person. And I felt completely untethered to all of the boxes I put myself in my day-to-day life. So really, it really was a truly transformative experience, I'd say.
Well, let's segue then into who's first on your list, because it sounds like there might be a connection there, or maybe somebody within the five. So, okay, well, who do you want to talk about first? Who's first on your list?
Well, the first name that came to mind straight away was my dad. So my dad, I lost my dad when I was 13. He died of a heart attack quite suddenly. He was on his way to work, waiting for the bus, the minibus to pick him up, and had a huge heart attack, and he was taken from us. And I'm the youngest of four. My sister was the eldest. She was 18. My brothers were 17 and 16, and then me. So we were all teenagers, and it was all very, very sudden. So my memories of my dad, they're still kind of, my relationship with my dad's still evolving in a very interesting and beautiful way, I think, because I mentioned I became a dad 18 months ago, and that then brought up a load of memories and feelings and experiences of my own dad and being a son to him. So my kind of actual memories of him are quite fleeting, because I was 13 when he died, and he worked a lot. He worked in a factory, and he worked night shifts and then day shifts, and so he was working 6, sometimes 7 days a week. So we didn't see him that much. So it's more the sense I had of being around him, and the way he made me feel, and the things I've learned about him since from family, from my mum, from his friends, and the legacy he left behind. And when I think about the way he made me feel when I was really small, and we shared a bed together until I was about 6 or 7. So we had this very rare and intimate connection of sharing a bed with my dad. And he made me feel safe. He made me feel happy. He made me feel important. And I remember he was very affectionate with me, very tender. He was the only person actually in our family who was really affectionate and tender with me. And as a man, he was, the words that come to mind are pride and dignity. He carried himself in a certain way in the community. So I grew up. My parents were immigrants from India, from northern India, both Sikhs. We grew up in this small Sikh community in a small market town in the middle of England, and he kept himself on the edges of the community because there was a lot of sort of politics and kind of, I guess, hypocrisy and dishonesty and things that I think he didn't really want to get embroiled in. And he was also the sort of person who didn't like to be the centre of attention. But he had, from hearing the way people talk about him, he had a certain standing in the community, but deliberately kept himself on the edges of it. And I had this sort of sense of dignity in treating people well. And when I thought about this conversation, I mean, there's two stories I often tell about my dad. One is that my sister was born in 1974. 1972. And in those days, and perhaps still now, you didn't celebrate the birth of a daughter. So when a son was born, you gave out sweets, boxes of sweets, traditional Indian thing to do, and you take them out to people's houses to say, "Oh, I've had a son," and you eat something sweet. My dad got these boxes of sweets when my sister was born and was taking them around to people's houses. And people said to him, "I thought you had a daughter." And he said, "Yeah, I had a daughter. It's my first child. I'm really happy." And that was my dad. I'm getting tears in my eyes just thinking about that. The other thing he did, also related to my sister, was he had a sense he was unwell. He knew he was unwell, actually. I think he had heart disease, but he hadn't told us. And he had a sense that something might happen. He might die quite suddenly or get quite sick. And so he said to my mum that all of us must go to university, including my sister, because education was really important to him and to my mum. But he emphasised my sister because in those days, a lot of people thought if you have a daughter, you get her married off, particularly if there's no father in the household. So when he died, my sister was 6 months away from going to university. And all of the community kind of gathered around my mum and said, "Well, presumably you're going to get your daughter married." And she'd made a promise to my dad, and she kept her promise that her daughter was going to go to university. And I think that says a lot about my dad.
Gosh, so much to unpack there. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry you had that experience. I mean, 13 is a difficult age to lose any parent, but I think for a boy, particularly their father, and it sounds like the relationship with him was just incredibly special. And you know, you do need your role models more than ever in your teenage years, and yours was just taken. So I'm so sorry that happened. The fact that he was in the community, but also chose to sort of, I don't know, be on the outside a little bit, looking into it and deciding for himself what he wanted his family to be. I think that shows he has great, character, I suppose, and judgment. And the backing of your sister. I mean, I spent many years in India, as you know, and I know that pull from society on people's expectations, particularly for the women in the community. So for him to sort of have the presence of mind, first of all, the heart spirit to celebrate her birth, and then have the presence of mind to say, even if I'm not here, this is what I want. That's remarkable, and clearly by your emotion, he had a big impact on you. So I'm very glad he's number one on the list. Thank you for sharing that as well. That was really, really nice to hear. Okay, so let's go to number two. Who was next?
Number two is another family member, actually. So there's my sister and two brothers, and the younger of my two brothers I'm quite close with. And in some ways we're quite similar, in some ways we're very different. And I think the ways in which we're similar is that we were both quite rebellious, kind of adventurous spirits growing up, pushing the boundaries, doing things we shouldn't be doing.
So trouble, basically.
Trouble. We were trouble. But the eldest two were quite sensible and quite quite well behaved. We were trouble. And as we've grown older, that we've become closer and we've done a lot of things together. I mean, we still, I live in a different country now, but we still go away together maybe twice a year. And I could think about a lot of times when we were younger that he influenced me in ways that I didn't fully appreciate at the time, and still influences me now, particularly as a husband and a father. He's got 3 kids, and I look at the way he is with his family and with his wife, who's also an amazing person. And they are my main model for family life, and he's my main model for what it means to be a good man, to be a good husband, to be a good father. And again, one of the first memories that came back when I was thinking about this conversation was, hello.
Sorry, Jindy, I realised that I'm so focused on you, I hadn't even noticed her. For anybody listening and not watching, my little dog has just arrived on my shoulder to join in the conversation. I take it she's in shot.
A lovely participant, a lovely addition to the conversation.
Yes, well, very distracting. Go away. Sorry, Jindy.
Yeah, I had this memory of my brother. We used to walk home from school together, and when we were quite young, I guess this particular memory, I would have been maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7. We experienced quite a lot of racist abuse and sort of bullying or people trying to bully us. And there was this kid for a while who would follow us home from school. He would wait for us, and he'd follow the 3 of us home, and he'd kind of shout abuse at us and try and intimidate us. And it wasn't a pleasant experience. I was a few years younger than my brothers as well, so I was still learning, I think, to stick up for myself. And my brother eventually, after a few days of this, his name's Sat. Sat eventually decided he'd had enough of this and just rounded on this guy and exchanged punches with him. Oof. And mostly my brother throwing, and I could see the shock on this guy's face. And I remember exactly where it was. It was the top of a road called Fir Road. And it was called Fir Road because there was this massive fir tree over the top. And in my mind's eye, it's kind of, the sun is setting behind them and there's this fir tree and there's my brother silhouetted, which obviously isn't how it looked, but that's how I remember it. And I remember just the sheer defiance on his face of, I'm not having this.
Yeah, yeah.
And that kid never bothered us again. And when I think about that, it kind of it was one of the first lessons in, I can just say, no, I'm not having this. This is not right, it's not fair, and I'm going to stick up for myself. And that was Sat throughout our childhood. He had a defiance and a refusal to bow to unfair treatment, particularly racism, bullying, anything of that nature. He'd stick up for himself. And I took a lot from that.
Well, I mean, as role models go, there's you've got a great one there, because you're absolutely right that bravery to say, no, that's not okay with me. It says a lot about his sense of self and his self-worth. And I think of those people that, and I'm a bit of a sort of stand up to bullies type. And it doesn't come from a place of wanting to be violent or wanting to be aggressive or any of those things. I mean, I'm a very sort of calm person as well. But if you pushed me, I will defend myself because I value who I am. I value that I think I know I'm a good person and I don't deserve this. And nor did you, and nor did your brother. And so for him to have that sense of self-worth is what shocks bullies. Because you're not supposed to have it. You're supposed to just go, oh, sorry, just don't cause any trouble, just look away. But no, I can totally see why he's that image of him behind I mean, let's be honest, 2 boys scrapping is probably not. It's not like something off John Wick, is it? It's always just flailing arms and legs and pulling on jackets. But in our mind's eye, there was a heroic moment there for you, and that's how you remember it.
it's quite likely none of the blows connected.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's like Karate Kid or
Yeah.
Rocky or something like that. But the symbolism of it was
Absolutely.
the thing that stayed with me.
Yeah, and him as a father role model is so important. You know, I
Yeah,
as you know, I grew up without a mother, and I remember when my daughter was born, just so grateful that there were people around me that I could model motherhood on, that not necessarily our mothers. So same with you with your brother for your as a sort of subordinate. That's not the right word, is it? Surrogate is the right word. Surrogate representation of your dad. I think that's really, really beautiful, actually. Okay, good. So we got Sat or Sack?
Sat.
Sat. We got Sat as
SAT.
number 2. Number 3. Who's number 3?
Number 3 is my friend John from school. So John and I met when we were 11, and we became really good friends towards the end of school, so kind of GCSEs, 14, 15. And then we both went into sixth form together. And we've always kept in touch. And I think there's something really formative and special about those years. And in terms of particularly culture and sense of humour and those sorts of things, for me, were formed by the friends I had then. And so John was a really smart kid, and he was also really into music, really into football, and I took a lot of my musical and football and other cultural influences from John. And John, I would say, back then was a hipster before a hipster was such a thing. So one of the things I learned from him is that there's so much more to culture than mainstream culture. He was into films that no one else was into. He was into bands and music that no one else was into. He was into kind of obscure European football that no one else was into. In the mid-90s, Italian football came on Channel 4 and we were both madly into that. But he already knew it all already. And he didn't support the main teams. He supported a team in Florence called Fiorentina.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys. And he wasn't doing it deliberately. He was just more interested in what's off the beaten track, what's over here.
Yeah.
And he was massively into the Fast Show, so I massively got into the Fast Show, and we were both really into Stuart Lee, and we remain really into Stuart Lee. So our sense of humour, our sense of comedy, the films we watched, that all formed through that friendship, really. And another guy called Paul, and the three of us are still friends, but John in particular. And I've got so many happy memories from that period of about 4 or 5 years. And then we went off to uni and we kept in touch, but for a long time we weren't sort of close and keeping in touch regularly. But then we lived in London at the same time, so we saw a bit more of each other. And now we've in the last few years, John lives in Cardiff, I live in Berlin, Paul lives in Bournemouth. We've rekindled that friendship a bit. And he came over to visit a few weeks ago. And it was really lovely to spend, a few days together. And we sat and had this conversation, found some time for ourselves, went and had this conversation. And I shared with him some things I'd never shared with him before, about my childhood, about my dad, for example. And he shared with me some things he'd never shared before. And this conversation, we were about 2 hours into it. And he said something like, it's really great to be able to talk about this sort of stuff. And I said, yeah, it feels really nice that we're able to have a meaningful conversation. And he paused and he said, yeah, but we always did that. And I thought, yeah, you're right, actually. Even as sixth formers, we would kind of go and sit at the edge of the field or something, or, go somewhere and just have a conversation together. And that was, I think, also a pillar of our friendship, that we could talk about things perhaps in a way that if we were around other boys in particular, we might not have felt comfortable doing. So yeah, John has probably been more of an influence on my life than he realizes.
Well, there's clearly a direct link between that comfort that you had with him to talk about things and your desire to create that for other men in Leader Brother Son, because the benefit. You know that it's really important that there's somebody that's got a listening ear who's known you. And the good thing about knowing people for so long is you don't have to fill in any gaps. I mean, there's always a joy meeting new people, of course, and you learn something new every time. But there's something extra special about people who've known you since you were at your school days. And, you can't bullshit them, can you? Because they know your whole story.
Yeah.
And there's something very real about that and very reassuring. So I can just picture you in that sort of school field, away from the crowd, just getting into it. My son's a bit like that, by the way. He comes back from hanging out with his mates, and I had all these expectations of what he might be talking about. And what did he come back with once? Something about... he's seen something about an apple in a glass that eventually turned back into an apple if you give it enough years. And this was him unlocking, how we live for eternity. And I'm like, you're 18. Why are you talking about this? How come you're not talking about Love Island or something? But him and his mates, that's what they were getting into. They were just hanging out together, and this was their discussion. And do you know what? It wouldn't have mattered what they spoke about. It was just the fact that they were talking, and they were talking at a sort of deeper level than kind of the sort of surface chat that you see so much of. So John sounds like a very important guy in your life. And I love the fact he's opened your mind to... I watched the Italia football back in the day. I knew more about Juventus and Lazio and people like that than I did about the local clubs. So there's something revealing about me there. Okay, so he sounds really, really important, and I can see why he's on your list. Okay, so we've done your dad, we've done Sat, we've now done John. So who is fourth on your list?
Number 4 is my wife, Lucy. So we met 3.5 years ago, and we knew as soon as we met that this was the real deal. Within 6 weeks, we were talking about, in fact, she asked me, and this is one of the things I love about her. She struck up the conversation of, how do you feel about marriage and kids? And I was so glad that she had opened that conversation, because they were both things I wanted.
Yeah.
But also it spoke to her courage to kind of go, well, let's not mess around here. How do you feel about these things? We often joke, it feels like that it felt like we'd known each other for thousands of years, that maybe we've met in previous lives. And that is the way it feels. And so much I could say. I mean, the phrase that comes to mind when I think of Lucy is daring spirit. She's got a daring spirit, which doesn't come across to people when they first meet her, I think. So she studied law, did a degree in law, and realised by the end of it she didn't want to be a lawyer. And she'd gone to a good university. She went to sort of King's College, and so kind of you've gone down that path of, I've got a law degree from King's College. So she decided to go to Japan for a year, and she lived in Japan for a year teaching English, and I can see now that's the sort of person she is. Well, I don't want to do this, don't know what I do want to do, so I'll go to Japan for a year. So she went to Japan for a year and realised one of the things what she really wanted to do was get into advertising. So she came back, pretty much binned her law degree, and started again doing this prestigious sort of advertising course. And came out of it, got a job at a big agency. She worked for Salchi and Salchi, worked for some other agencies. So was forging her career in advertising, and then decided she wanted to move, wanted to live somewhere else apart from the UK. Moved to Shanghai. So she moved to Shanghai and lived there for 3 years, working for an agency. Then she met someone, her relationship before she met me, who was German, and decided, okay, let's move back to Germany. And this is Lucy. This is the way she sort of lived her life until now, and that spirit is still there, of not planning too much, paying attention to what she really wants, but also really taking risks and following her instincts and her intuition. And by the time I'd met her, I'd say I'd definitely begun to pay more attention to my intuition and my instincts. But with Lucy, it's a whole different level. I sometimes meet people and I'll tell her about this situation I'm having, and she will instinctively go, "That sounds like this to me." And then a month later, I find out she's absolutely right. Her instincts for a person are just so strong. Her intuition's so strong, and that's the way she lives her life, and that's who she is, and that's what she's brought to our relationship and brought to me. And now she took a year off when our son was born, and now she's building her own program to teach small conscious entrepreneurs about branding and advertising, because obviously they can't afford an agency. She's gone deeper into her spirituality. She's also a Reiki practitioner. No coincidence, going back to Kilimanjaro story, and again has kind of deepened and expanded my spiritual awareness as well.
Yeah.
So she's someone I see as a partner, and also someone I learn a lot from regularly.
But you sound quite similar. I mean, the sort of the spirit of just, I'm going to go and do this. I mean, it's quite a similar pathway, if though different sides of the globe. It sounds similar to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that brings us together, and we are in some ways very similar. Very similar, and I think we see kindred spirits in each other. If she was having this conversation, she might say some of the same things about me. So that's certainly part of our relationship, and it's certainly why we see it as a partnership. It really does feel like a partnership. We both care about our work. We both care about what we want to do in life and our missions, and we both generally approach life in the same way, with that kind of daring, taking chances, not being constrained by the way it should be done or the well-trodden path, or the formulas that are usually presented to us.
Yeah, and that's very inspirational. I think particularly if you've trained to be something, it's not nothing, is it, to become a fully fledged lawyer, and then to say, actually, I'm going to go and do this. That takes a lot of bravery, and again back to that self-belief thing that says, I'll be fine. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I'll be fine in it. So let's just see where this goes. I can relate to that. People look at my career history and say, what led to that decision? And I say, I can't remember. But you know what I mean? There wasn't a great big ordained plan. It was just kind of how life revealed itself, shall we say, in front of me. And, back to the intuition point, sometimes you have to feel your way and just say, this is where I belong. This is where I energetically fit, or where this feels right. So, good for you. Good for both of you.
That's one of the first things that struck me about one of our first conversations, was this sense that you hadn't planned your life too much. You just kind of followed what came next. And in reading your book as well, this kind of, okay, this looks interesting, I'll go and do this.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Allowing it to unfold in that way was one of the things that struck me when we first met.
Well, thank you for saying that, because that is how I am. I feel like I'm here to experience this. I don't have any goals. There's nothing to win. There's nothing to get. There's nothing to take. It's like, just want to experience it. I just want to do some good things, meet some great people, eat some great food, do some good things to put more in than I take out. I mean, very simple things. Be of good service. I know it sounds all very sort of charitable, but I suppose that is it. I don't really see any other purpose for it, and I don't even think about it in terms of legacy and stuff like that, because legacy is what? It's the people you touch in your life and may have them be some kind of imprint, like what we're doing here. We're talking about the people that have made a difference. To me, that's legacy. It's not a statue in a town centre, or cool for those people that have had that, but it's not something I chase after. So yeah, I'm completely, there's no wonder we're friends, because I'm all about that too. And thank you for giving validation to my lack of planning. Good. All right. So let's get to the final one then. Who's number 5?
The final one, I think, is probably my son. Well, it is my son Ren. who's 18 months old, and is I can definitely see some character and personality in him now. I have done for some time actually. He's non-stop energy. He's non-stop joy. He's all about exploring. He's all about finding something dangerous. I sometimes joke he's like a bomb disposal baby. Like you put him in a room and he'll find the danger within 1 minute. And he loves people. It's one of the things we've both really observed about him. He comes alive when there's people around. So we often have people around to our apartment and go and see people, and that's when he's just really at his best, and he just loves meeting new people and is very comfortable very quickly around people. So I look at him and I kind of admire that. I kind of go, well, that must have come from your mother. It's not that I don't like people. I love people, but he has an ease and a comfort with it that is really admirable. And I think just that unbridled joy that I think, I mean, you'll know as a mother, seeing life through his eyes and the simplicity that he invites me into, and the play that he invites me into. You know, if you were to ask me my peak moments in the last few days, it would be lying on the floor with him climbing on top of me and both of us giggling. And he forces me to be present and playful in that way. And I think that's a real gift. I think I try to remember that he's shaping me and teaching me as much as I'm doing the opposite.
Oh, and more to come, Jindy. Honestly, they never stop teaching you something. These kids of ours, and that sounds marvelous. I mean, okay, 18 months and you already can see the spirit, and I think that's right. I think you know your children, their character and qualities quite early. My daughter's 23 today, and you saying about that joyous thing, it's still the thing I look for more than anything and love is to watch her just throw her head back and laugh without any self-consciousness, because that's the baby she was. That's the young child she was. And it's one of the things it just melts me when I see it. And you want it to remain. You know, that's the protector in you is like, oh, just, you know, as long as you can move through life and still experience joy, and you know that's something you want them to do. So no, I can completely relate. And the giggling on the floor thing; these are all the stuff that you know they stay with you, don't they? And do you think he's changed you in these last 18 months? Do you feel you're different in any way?
I definitely. I think he's forced me to be more patient. And to be even less, even more spontaneous, and less of a planner. I mean, you'll know what it's like. Our nursery is at the end of the road, so it's like a 5-minute walk, less than 5 minutes. But if I walk him there, it might take half an hour.
You've got to stop and look at everything.
Yeah, stop and look at everything, climb into some doorway or look at a tree, or you know. And that's great,
Yeah.
you know. And he really reminds me that's beautiful. That half hour to him is everything. He doesn't see A to B. We've got to get to this place. So there's all sorts of ways in which he reminds me and encourages me to be present and patient.
I like that. He sounds good. He can join my gang too. I like the sound of Ren. He sounds cool. All right, so you know we've done the 5. And I can already plot a handful of connections where I'm thinking, right, I can see how that person's influenced you in just the short interactions we've had. So obviously I don't know you as well as some. But do you know yourself, when you look back and you've thought deeply about these 5, can you pinpoint things like patience that Ren's taught you, and maybe a spirit of adventure from Lucy, etc.? But do you recognise it in yourself? Do you think those people have actually changed who I am and influenced me fundamentally?
Yeah, I think just in this conversation, actually, just as I'm telling their stories and listening to some of what I'm saying, I can see how some of those things exist in me in the way that I live. And perhaps the thread that runs through all of them is a sense of adventure and a daring spirit, and a willingness to take risks and do things differently.
Yes, I would
It's,
definitely agree with that.
it's probably a common thread in all of them, and that's never really occurred to me before. And that's certainly influenced the way I live. I mean, there's so much more I could tell you about my dad, the way he did things differently to his generation, and the legacy he left behind, when after he died. But it really has, as I've got older, gone, oh, wow, that was quite a fundamental thing that he did, to live so differently to the way that everyone else was living. And I could say that about all of the people I've mentioned, to pull away from the gravity of what society is telling you should do, and to live on your own terms, I think is not an easy thing.
No.
And I think it exists in all of those people that I've mentioned.
Well, you're a wonderful writer, Jindy. I feel a book coming on. Me and My Dad. Because he sounds like a really, although you only had a short amount of years with him, he sounds an incredible man. And also the things that he did, if you could spin those into stories and pull that to life in some kind of book, I think a lot of people would want to read that. And the way you talk about him is very, very poetic, and I'm sure you could make a really fantastic job of that.
Thank you. There is a kind of a book in the works, so it may see the light of day one time. But if I could share one more story about my dad.
Please, yeah.
A few years ago, it was during COVID actually, I went back to my hometown to see my sister, and we went for a long walk. And this car went past us, and then it turned around and pulled up next to us. And I hadn't spotted who it was. My sister had. It was my dad's best friend. He had very few sort of close friends, and he had one best friend, and it was this guy. And he lives sort of 10, 15 minutes walk from where my mum lives now. And he'd seen us, and he'd swung round, and he hadn't seen me for years, and he wound the window down, and he said, "I thought it was you. You look just like your dad." And that was such a meaningful thing to hear, because the only other person who could say that with such gravity is my mum. And so I never really have a sense of how much like my dad I am or not, really. And then he immediately dropped into a conversation about how much he missed my dad. And how my dad was like an older brother to him, and how he and my dad kept themselves on the edges of the community, as I mentioned, and they just saw things a little bit differently and wanted to live a little bit differently. And that spoke so much to me, that was my dad's best friend, because this guy is unlike other guys of his generation, of that community, of Indian guys, at that age, that he immediately dropped into this emotional, meaningful, deep conversation, and he had tears in his eyes as he was talking about my dad. So that told me a lot about my dad. It really did. And this guy that came to my wedding, and that meant a lot to me as well, that he was there in some ways carrying the torch of my dad, I think.
Yeah, and keeping that connection.
Yeah.
That my partner lost her mum recently, and she now spends quite a lot of time with her mum's best friend, because it's where they can sit together and talk the stories, speak about her, share the memories, and keep that connection. So there's multiple layers going on there. There's the warmth of being identified as the son of someone you hold in such high regard. Then that person then coming back into your life and being significant, that's amazing. Being able to talk about that person in such warmth and have some history and context and stories you probably wouldn't have even known about, because a best friend knows you differently to your son, right? And then the other thing that struck me when you spoke was, we were talking about legacy earlier very briefly, and to be well spoken of, isn't that like the most important thing? I think. I know I've made a few mistakes in my life, I'm sure, but generally speaking, I'd like to think I'm well spoken of, and it's something that I really not aspire, because it's not like I have to try terribly hard at it. I'm not saying I concentrate on it, but to live well is to be spoken of well, isn't it? In my opinion, anyway. So you must have been very proud to hear your dad be spoken of so well, and
Yes.
he would be too, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the way you framed legacy in this conversation. It's the impact we have on people and the way they remember us. So perhaps that is legacy.
Yeah.
And keeping the flame alive in some way of people who are no longer with us is honouring that legacy, perhaps.
100%. Totally believe in that. Okay, so a question I want to ask all my guests is, these people have all invested in you. You've been impacted by them. They've had some kind of influence on on the person you are today. What specifically or generally do you feel you can, or you're either already doing or will take forward in how you are in the world?
Well, I think some of these people need to be thanked for the impact they've had on me. They need to know. I think they probably do know, but they need to know explicitly. I think I do some of this in my work. I think this is part of what drives my work, particularly with men, is to pass on whatever I've learned and continue to learn, and the experiences I've had, because they have some meaning. I think that the reason I've had the experiences I've had has given me an opportunity, a responsibility almost, to be able to give something to other people, to open up some doors, some questions, some more exploration, some more daring perhaps. And that's how I approach my work, I think, and that's hopefully what I'm leaving behind in some way. And who knows what the ripple of that will be, but I feel I can speak about it in those slightly lofty terms because I don't even really think of it as my work. I feel like I'm doing at least part of what I'm here to do. And so it's kind of just, I'm channeling it rather than creating anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you see somebody who's so doing the thing they were meant to be doing, you're right, it's effortless. It looks effortless. I'm sure it has its challenges. Not least kind of the energy you must have to put in, even if it's subconscious, to encourage meaningful conversation. I think people who are good at conversation, people don't necessarily appreciate the emotional energy it takes to keep that going, to facilitate a meaningful connection. So yes, it probably looks like this is just natural for you, but from the outside looking in, I can see that it's a higher purpose and that you put a lot of emotional energy into it. So absolutely, I agree that you're already embodying it. It wasn't a test. It wasn't a challenge. Come on, Jindy, go and do something good in the world, for goodness sake. When are you going to do something? I think if anything, it's the opposite. It's like, now you're a father and everything else that's going on in your life. I'm sure it's hard to make time for all these things.
Well, that is the third one I wanted to come on to. Obviously, my son, and if we have more children, is I think of myself as a guide rather than a teacher. What spirit has arrived in our lives, and how can I best guide it to its full potential? And so that's definitely something I think about a lot. And it's a question I should keep thinking about. It's a lovely question. And at the end of we run these free groups about 8 weeks. At the end of those 8 weeks, we have a similar invitation to people of how are you going to pay this forward? What next? How are you going to take this out into your life? What are you going to offer to other people now that you've had this experience that you've said that you found really meaningful? And I do think it's a really lovely way a lovely important kind of consideration in whatever we're doing is, okay, how does this get paid forward? I've received a lot. I might be giving a lot, but what other impact or legacy can we leave?
Yeah, no, I like that. When you said about guiding, something popped into my head. I listened to a podcast the other day, and they used the expression of or not the expression, the kind of image of a shepherd shepherding its flock. And do you know the expression "spare the rod, spoil the child"? Have you ever heard of this?
No,
It's quite an old-fashioned thing, but it's kind of always been interpreted as, if you're not strict with your child, and the rod's kind of seen as a stick to beat. I mean, it's not a positive image. But if you're not firm and you're not, firm-handed, you're going to spoil your child. They're going to be spoiled. And this person was exploring that the origins of that is actually to do with the shepherd guiding its sheep with a rod that gently nudges the sheep in the right directions and keeps them on track. So when you were speaking, I kind of popped into my head as a visual image. It's not about forcing your will or, changing that person using any kind of force, whether it be emotional or physical. It's just it's the shepherd's rod. That's where it originated. The rod that says, come on, just a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm here just to guide. You're going to do what you're ever going to do because you're you. This is Ren. But I'm just here as kind of in a supporting role. And I don't know how many people have thought of it that way. I didn't. When she said this, spare the rod, spoil the child. My 70s, 80s upbringing went straight to the slipper and the cane. But actually, that's not the origins of it. It's just been distorted over years. So there you go.
Lovely.
Little something new. You probably hadn't heard that before, Jindy.
I hadn't. No, that's really lovely. It's a lovely metaphor, I think.
Yeah.
Just the little nudge, the little tap.
And all I've done is pass that on. But somebody else might listen to that today and go, oh, didn't know that either. And so it goes. All right, I like the sound of all of that. That sounds amazing. Okay, so my last question, and I did give you a bit of time to prepare this, but not much, is one of my other purposes of doing this is I really want to meet interesting people. I said in an earlier podcast that I'm a bit of a collector. I just really believe that the richness and diversity in my life is because of all the amazing people in it. So who would you suggest I speak to next and why?
I'm going to suggest someone called Jess Gregson.
I'm going to write that down.
So I met Jess a few years ago, and we met on Lunch Club, actually. I don't know if you know Lunch Club, where you kind of you just get matched with someone and you have a conversation for half an hour, and we immediately hit it off. And Jess's background is in sort of creative agencies. She used to run creative agencies and also in music. She used to work in the music industry. So some overlap perhaps with your experiences. And but she has recently, a couple of years ago, started a collective of independent consultants, each of whom have their own sort of specialism, and has gradually grown it. And I was one of the first people she asked to join. And Jess is someone who I think genuinely embodies her belief in people. She really believes that if you bring good people together, you can do great work. And if you trust people and believe in them. Yeah. And I love the way she embodies that in the organisation, the collective she's created, the way she just is in conversation, the way she kind of has lived her life. And she's from Sheffield, and I have an affinity with Northerners in particular. But she's got some, just some fascinating history and story, I think. And so she is someone who I could imagine will probably have about 20 people she could name as having influenced and shaped her life. So, all right. Jess Gregson.
Well, she sounds amazing. I'm obviously going to get you to connect us, so I can meet her. That she sounds someone I'd really like to know. So, but Jindy, thank you so much for today. Apologies again for my dog. I don't know what happened there. I think she just gets jealous. She's just like, who are you talking to and why isn't it me? But thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I knew I'd enjoy this conversation. Mark is probably still jealous that I spoke about you more than him in that introduction. But I knew it would be a great conversation. So thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you. And I'll just say if there was a sixth Mark, it probably would have been Mark. Mark almost made it onto the list. So I think that's worth saying. But I've really enjoyed this. As I said to you before we started, this is such a lovely way to have a conversation, and it's brought up a lot of memories and emotion for me in a very meaningful way, very very positive way. So I have some thanking to do, some gratitude to pass on. But thanks for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Jindy. So that was Jindy. I really enjoyed that. that was such a natural and easy conversation for me. I just really just felt relaxed and happy to be talking with him. So if you enjoyed that conversation, please like and subscribe to People Are Everything, and maybe share it with somebody that you feel might appreciate it also. Until next time, thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye now.